The coal industry was experiencing a huge boom from the 1910s to the 1920s. But this was not without its problems. We will walk through World War I and the Spanish flu and its impact on the coal industry of the time. Then, we will continue with the first mine closures, the stock market crash of 1929, and the selling of the town of Wheelwright, Kentucky. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this help to fire up the time machine, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. World War I. The First World War had taken place from July 28, 1914 through November 11, 1918. This actually caused an economic boom for the United States coal industry. Because of the fighting overseas, the coal mines in Great Britain and Europe had to close down. But coal was still needed to keep homes warm, factories running, and ships sailing. So the coal miners of the Appalachians took up the slack. But the call soon came out for the men of the United States to join the war effort, and many men from this region did answer the call. In the November 1918 Mountain Eagle, we do have a short article or advert slot for those in Letcher County, Kentucky that lost their lives that year. Quote, Our heroes. These made the supreme sacrifice. Douglas Day, killed in action. Emery Igo, killed in action. Bradley Burkhart, killed in action. Patrick H. Hall, killed in action. Clell Anderson, killed in action. Elijah B. Dixon, killed in action. John Richardson, died in France. George W. McKnight, died in France. On Fame's eternal camping ground, their silent tents are spread. They died the noblest of all deaths in defense of their country. Unquote. So, was the coal mining industry lacking for men during that time? Not really, because of the terms of the Selective Service Law Act of Congress approved May 18, 1917. Under this act, as long as a man was gainfully employed by a coal company, then he could file for an exemption to the draft. Many of the men of the area took this exemption, while others did not. But, as we can see, the tides of World War I didn't exactly leave the people of Kentucky alone. Letcher County lost at least 8 men, according to the Mountain Eagle, but with the men came a new horror, a pandemic. The 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic. The Spanish flu pandemic, which lasted from 1918 through 1919, infected around 500 million people. This was approximately one-third of the world's population at the time. It was spread to the United States through the troops coming home from World War I. We do know that the Spanish flu did hit the Appalachian Mountains, according to the 1918 Mountain Eagle. Quote, a triple burying. On Cumberland, last Sunday, 3 persons were interred at the same graveyard, all of whom were victims of influenza. Pneumonia, however, brought on their deaths. John D. Smith, a married man and son of Floyd Smith, had been ill for more than 10 days and passed away Saturday. One of the older victims was a daughter of Wilsie Sturgill Hawley and was about 16. The other was a daughter of David Boggs and was also a young woman. We offer sympathies to those good people in their awful distress. Quite a number of other cases of influenza are reported in that section of the country. Unquote. While we could not find the exact number of people who died in eastern Kentucky during this pandemic, it was quite devastating to the state as a whole. According to the article, the 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic, quote, approximately 13,000 to 14,000 Kentuckians were casualties of the first and second waves of the pandemic, unquote. We can only imagine how devastating this was to the communities. And I am sure a lot of coal miners were either out sick or had died from the illness. On a personal narrator's note, my great grandfather, Finley Adams, served in World War I. During the time that the Spanish flu was hitting the United States shores, Finley was aboard a troop ship that was coming back from World War I when he was enlisted to help with the sick troops. His new job was to carry litters of men who were sick, dying, or dead from the flu. We would like to thank Finley, despite his own personal health risk, for his selfless act of helping the troops off the ship and getting them to a place that they could get help if it was possible. The closing of Garrett Mine number 326. When Garrett was first opened, it was called Ballard. It did have its own post office, but the mail for the coal mines were sent to Steele's Creek and was distributed at the Allen Post Office. While Garrett was a huge hub for the Elk Horn Coal Corporation, it had to close its first mine in 1927. We are not for sure why this particular mine had to close, but it could have been that the mine was too gassy to mine, or that they ran into another mine that connected the two together. Or it could have been that they simply ran out of the coal seam that they were working on. But for whatever the reason, more mine closures would be behind it just a few years later. The stock market crash of 1929. We will cover the crash in very broad strokes and how it affected the coal industry. In 1929, the United States economy was showing signs of trouble. The first problem was that the United States average wage was too low to support the economy. No one had the money to buy anything, so the purchasing power was too low. This caused a domino effect to run through the different sectors of the economy. The agricultural sector had falling prices due to overproduction. The consumer goods manufacturer had high output, but had the same problems with falling prices due to overproduction. To compensate, the factories would lay off workers, but the more workers who were laid off, then the less people who could buy anything. The New York Stock Exchange was not working like it is today. There were no safety nets, and these issues came to a head in the autumn months of 1929. In September of 1929, there were some experienced shareholders that saw the writing on the wall. Prices could not continue soaring while there was no one buying the products. So, they began selling off their stock. This action caused a shaky stock market to begin to fall as more investors who were observant began to sell off their stocks. To keep the economy from completely collapsing, the leading bankers got together and bought stock above the market value. This stabilized the New York Stock Exchange for 1 month. Then, finally on Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, the stock market collapsed. The economy was unable to recover from this collapse, and thus from 1929 through the late 1930s became a time called the Great Depression. The stock market crash and the Great Depression of 1929 hit the coal industry very hard. In response, the coal owners and operators decided to sell their fuel at below cost to increase the national dependency upon coal. The cut in wages caused a lot of strikes and backlash from the coal miners. Please see our videos on the coal wars. All of the investors of Elk Horn Coal Corporation either lost all of their money or the majority of their money on the Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. The hardest hit of the list of investors was ex-Senator Clarence Watson. The selling of Wheelwright, Kentucky. As we have previously stated, the city of Wheelwright was established in 1917 and named after Consolidation Coal Company's president, Jerry H. Wheelwright. Elk Horn leased Wheelwright's mines from the Consolidation Coal Company. Because of the trouble that Consol was now having selling their coal because of the Great Depression, they sold their holdings of Wheelwright to Inland Steel. This would be the first town to be sold by the Consolidation Coal Company to keep themselves solvent. As America was changing after the Great Depression, the reliance on coal was starting to dwindle. This was because after World War I, Great Britain and Europe reopened their mines and was now producing coal for the market. Plus, steamships were now going to diesel fuel. In next week's video, we will continue with the downward spiral of Elk Horn Coal Corporation, and it will file its first bankruptcy case in the 1930s. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the scandals of the Consolidation Coal Company. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Please double check that you are subscribed, as many of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.